Something feels off in Cleveland, and it's not subtle anymore. Because what's happening with Dillon Gabriel right now doesn't look like a normal off-season situation. It looks like a quarterback quietly separating himself from the team. No appearances, no presence, no signs of engagement with the new staff. And in the NFL, that kind of absence always means something. Now, to be fair, it's not mandatory for players to be at the facility this time of year. That part is true, but context matters. Because when you're a quarterback trying to secure your place on a roster, especially in a crowded and uncertain situation, you usually want to be visible. You want to be around. You want to be seen. But that's not what's happening here. And that's where things start to raise questions. Because at the exact same time, Shedeur Sanders has been doing the complete opposite. He's been showing up consistently, putting in the work, making sure the new coaching staff knows he's serious about earning his role. That contrast, it's impossible to ignore. One quarterback present, one quarterback absent. One building momentum, one disappearing from the conversation. Now nothing has been officially confirmed. There's no statement saying Gabriel wants out or that the team has moved on. But there's been growing buzz suggesting that something behind the scenes isn't sitting right. Some believe he may already feel like the situation isn't in his favor. Others think he could be preparing for a fresh start somewhere else. Again, speculation. But when actions start telling a different story than words, people notice. Because in a league where every rep matters, every interaction matters, every impression matters, choosing not to be there sends a message, whether it's intentional or not. And right now, that message feels loud. Because this doesn't look like a quarterback preparing to compete. It looks like one preparing to move on. Let's talk about the part nobody can ignore anymore, because this is where things start to feel real. Dillon Gabriel has basically disappeared. No sightings at the facility, no buzz about him working with the new staff, no updates about him building chemistry or getting familiar with the system. It's like he's completely out of the picture, and in the NFL, that's never a small detail. Now sure, technically, he doesn't have to be there. Off-season rules allow players to train on their own, stay away, handle things privately. That part is normal. But context changes everything. Because when you're a quarterback, and not just any quarterback, but one fighting to stay relevant in a crowded room, you usually don't want to be out of sight. You want to be present. You want coaches to see your work ethic, your commitment, your urgency. And right now, none of that is happening. Which is why people are starting to ask questions. There's been growing buzz suggesting that this absence might not just be about off-season freedom. Some believe it could be frustration. Others think it might be a sign that Gabriel already sees where things are heading and doesn't like it. Again, nothing officially confirmed. But when a player who needs to compete isn't showing up in the environment where that competition is happening, it raises eyebrows. Because this isn't a locked-in starter skipping optional workouts. This is a quarterback whose position already feels unstable. And instead of leaning into that challenge, it looks like he's stepping away from it. That's what makes this feel different. Because in situations like this, perception becomes reality fast. Fans notice, media notices, coaches definitely notice. And once that narrative starts forming that a player isn't fully engaged, it's hard to shake. And here's the part that makes it even more intense. While Gabriel is nowhere to be found, someone else is doing the exact opposite. And that contrast, it's about to change everything. And this is where the situation takes a sharp turn, because while one quarterback is nowhere to be seen, the other is making sure he can't be ignored. Shedeur Sanders has been in the building consistently. Not once, not occasionally, consistently. Showing up, putting in work, being around the facility, getting familiar with the environment, and most importantly, making his presence known to the new coaching staff. And in a situation like this, that matters more than people realize. Because this isn't just about throwing passes or running drills. It's about visibility. It's about building trust early. It's about showing the coaches, the front office, even ownership, that you're locked in before things even officially begin. And right now, Shedeur is checking every one of those boxes. Now some people are trying to downplay it, saying it's just off-season work, saying it doesn't really mean anything yet. But let's be honest for a second. If the roles were reversed, if Dillon Gabriel was the one showing up every day while Shedeur was nowhere to be found, this would be a completely different conversation. It would be headlines. It would be questions. It would be, is Shedeur serious about this opportunity? But because it's the other way around, it's being treated like it's no big deal. And that's where fans are starting to push back. Because effort always shows. And in a quarterback competition, effort isn't just about performance, it's about positioning. It's about putting yourself in front of decision makers as often as possible. And Shedeur is doing exactly that. Now, to be fair, none of this guarantees anything. Showing up doesn't automatically win you the job, but it does something just as important. It puts you in the conversation early. It builds momentum before the real competition even starts. And when you combine that with everything else going on, the absence of Gabriel, the uncertainty in the room, the shifting expectations, it starts to feel like one player is leaning into the opportunity, while the other might already be pulling away from it. And if that gap keeps growing, this won't stay a quiet storyline for long. And this is where the situation starts to feel less like a competition and more like a separation. Because when you look at both sides closely, the difference isn't just about talent, it's about effort, presence, and intent. On one side, you've got Shedeur Sanders showing up, staying visible, putting himself in front of the coaching staff every chance he gets. He's making it clear, without saying a word, that he wants this opportunity. On the other side, you've got Dillon Gabriel, and right now, it's hard to even tell where he stands. Because absence creates questions. And in a high-stakes quarterback situation, those questions start turning into assumptions very quickly. Now, to be fair, effort doesn't always mean physical presence. Players can train off-site, work with private coaches, stay locked in mentally without being in the building every day. That happens all the time. But here's the difference: context. Because Gabriel isn't a locked-in starter. He's not a veteran with a guaranteed role. He's a quarterback whose position already feels unstable, and in that situation, most players lean in, not step back. And that's why fans are starting to notice the gap. It's not just about who's better. It's about who looks more invested. There's been growing speculation that Gabriel might already feel like this battle isn't in his favor, that maybe, in his mind, showing up right now doesn't change the outcome. And if that's the case, it would explain why his approach feels so different. Again, nothing confirmed. But perception matters. Because when one player is constantly present and the other isn't, the narrative almost writes itself. Coaches see it, teammates see it, the organization sees it. And that can quietly shift how decisions are made. Because in the NFL, availability isn't just about being healthy. It's about being there. And right now, it feels like one quarterback is fully stepping into the moment, while the other might already be stepping away from it. And if that perception continues to grow, this won't just be about effort anymore. It'll start shaping the outcome. And this is where the conversation starts to shift from what we see to what people think is really going on. Because there's a growing theory floating around right now that Dillon Gabriel might already be mentally checked out of this situation. Not officially, not publicly, but mentally. Now, to be clear, this is speculation. Nobody has come out and confirmed that Gabriel wants out or has given up on competing. But when you look at the signs, the absence, the lack of visibility, the timing, it's enough to get people talking. And once that idea starts circulating, it spreads fast. Because from the outside, it doesn't look like someone fully locked in on winning a job. It looks like someone who might already believe the outcome is set. And that changes everything. Because if a player feels like the decision has already been made behind the scenes, the mindset shifts. Instead of fighting for position, the focus becomes what's next. A fresh start, a new team, a different opportunity where the situation feels more open. Again, nothing confirmed. But there's been buzz suggesting that Gabriel could already be thinking along those lines, training away from the team, staying in his own environment, possibly preparing for whatever comes after Cleveland rather than what's happening inside it. And if that's even partially true, it explains the disconnect. Because this wouldn't just be about effort or attendance anymore. It would be about belief. Belief in the process, belief in the opportunity, belief that showing up right now actually changes something. And if that belief isn't there, everything else starts to fade with it. Now compare that to what's happening on the other side. While Gabriel's situation feels uncertain, Shedeur Sanders is acting like everything is still up for grabs, like nothing has been decided, like every moment matters. That difference in mindset, it's powerful. Because in close competitions, it's not always talent that separates players, it's who stays locked in the longest. And right now, it feels like one quarterback is fully invested in what's happening, while the other might already be preparing to move on from it. And if that theory turns out to be true, then this situation isn't just shifting. It's already decided. But here, where things stop feeling like a competition altogether and start looking like a transition. Because behind all the noise, all the speculation, and all the questions, there's a quiet move happening that changes everything. The Cleveland Browns aren't just evaluating their current quarterbacks. They're already looking ahead. Reports suggest the team could bring in a developmental quarterback later in the draft, someone new, someone fresh, someone they can mold from the ground up. And if that happens, it doesn't just add depth to the room. It reshapes it. Because those reps, the ones that used to belong to Dillon Gabriel, they don't stay his. They get reassigned. And in the NFL, once reps start disappearing, roles usually follow. Now, to be fair, drafting a developmental quarterback isn't unusual. Teams do it all the time. It's about building for the future, creating competition, adding insurance. But timing matters. And right now, the timing feels telling. Because this isn't happening in a stable quarterback room. This is happening in a situation where one player is already absent, already surrounded by questions, already losing momentum. So when you connect those dots, it starts to look less like planning and more like replacing. Again, nothing officially confirmed. But fans are starting to read between the lines. Because if the organization truly believed in Gabriel as a key part of the future, would they already be preparing to shift his reps to someone else? Would they already be looking for the next option before this situation even fully plays out? That's where the doubt creeps in. And that's where this situation starts to feel final. Because in the NFL, decisions aren't always announced, they're shown. Through reps, through attention, through who gets developed and who gets phased out. And right now, it feels like the Browns are quietly moving in a new direction. One that doesn't include Gabriel in the same way it once did. Which turns this from a battle for a position into a countdown to a change. And this is where things get even more interesting, because sometimes what coaches don't say tells you more than what they do. Right now, Todd Monken and the Browns staff haven't made any bold announcements. No headlines, No official statements about who's leading, who's falling behind, or what the final plan is. But if you pay close attention, their actions are speaking loud. Because in the NFL, coaches don't always reveal their intentions publicly. Instead, they show it through patterns, who they spend time around, who they build early relationships with, and who naturally becomes part of the daily conversation. And right now, that attention seems to be leaning one way. You've got Shedeur Sanders consistently around the facility, building familiarity with the environment, making himself visible to the staff. Even in a limited off-season setting where football discussions are restricted, presence still matters. It creates comfort. It builds recognition. And over time, that turns into trust. On the flip side, Dillon Gabriel hasn't even had that initial interaction with the new coaching staff. That alone is a detail you can't ignore. Because first impressions matter, especially with a new system, a new leadership group, and a fresh evaluation process. Now, to be fair, this doesn't automatically mean decisions have been made. Coaches evaluate over time. Training camp, pre-season, real reps. That's where things truly get decided. But early signals, they matter more than people think. There have been quiet speculation that the staff may already be forming their impressions, not based on performance yet, but on engagement, availability, and who's putting themselves in position to be evaluated closely. Again, nothing confirmed. But when one quarterback is consistently present and the other hasn't even connected with the coaching staff yet, it naturally starts to shape perception. And perception often becomes reality. Because coaches want reliability, they want players they can communicate with, observe, and gradually build around. And those relationships don't just appear overnight. They start early, sometimes before a single snap is taken. So while nothing has been officially said, the message might already be clear. One quarterback is being seen. The other is. And in a situation this competitive, that difference alone could end up deciding everything. And this is where everything starts to connect, because when you zoom out, this doesn't feel like a random situation anymore. It feels like a pattern. Because what's happening with Dillon Gabriel right now didn't just appear out of nowhere. If you look back, there were signs building up over time, losing his role last season, falling out of the main conversation, slowly becoming less of a priority. And now, it looks like the final stage of that same trajectory. Now, to be fair, every quarterback situation evolves. Depth charts change, players rise and fall. That's normal in the NFL, but what makes this different is how consistent the direction has been. It hasn't been up and down. It's been one way. Away. Meanwhile, on the other side, Shedeur Sanders is trending in the opposite direction. More visibility, more presence, more momentum building at exactly the right time. And that contrast, it doesn't feel accidental. There's been growing buzz suggesting that what we're seeing now is less about a current competition and more about a shift that's already been in motion. That the real decision-making may have started long before this offseason even began. Again, nothing officially confirmed. But when you line everything up, the absence, the reduced role, the lack of early connection with the new staff, and now the possibility of new quarterbacks being brought in, it starts to look less like coincidence and more like direction. And direction in the NFL is powerful. Because once a team starts leaning one way, everything begins to align with it. Reps, attention, development, opportunities, it all follows the same path. And if a player is on the outside of that shift, it becomes very hard to reverse. That's why this moment feels bigger than just off-season headlines. Because it's not just about what's happening today. It's about what's been happening. And if this truly is a pattern, then what we're watching right now isn't the beginning of a competition. It's the end of one. And when you put everything together, The absence, the effort gap, the speculation, the quiet moves behind the scenes, it all points to one thing. This isn't a competition anymore. It's a shift. Because in real competitions, things feel open, uncertain, fluid. But this situation, it feels like it's already leaning in one direction and getting stronger by the day. On one side, you have Shedeur Sanders doing everything you'd expect from someone trying to take control of an opportunity, showing up, staying visible, building early trust, positioning himself before the real action even begins. On the other side, you have Dillon Gabriel surrounded by questions, absence, uncertainty, and now growing speculation that his future with the team might already be slipping away. Now, to be fair, nothing has been officially decided. No depth chart has been finalized. No starter has been named. There's still time for things to change. But here's the reality. In the NFL, shifts don't always happen with announcements. They happen quietly, through patterns, through presence, through who the team starts investing in and who they slowly move away from. And right now, it feels like that process is already underway. Because when one quarterback is building momentum before camp even starts, and another is fading out of the conversation, it doesn't take a headline to understand what's happening. It just takes attention. There's been a lot of buzz, a lot of speculation, and a lot of people starting to connect the dots, not based on rumors alone, but based on what they're seeing unfold step by step. And what they're seeing is a direction, a clear one. Because situations like this don't stay balanced for long. Eventually, the gap becomes too big to ignore, and when that happens, decisions follow quickly. So now the real question is who's competing. It's who's left. Because if this trend continues, the Cleveland Browns won't need to announce a change. Everyone will already see it coming.